Hello, back to contracts. We are now going to be doing sample contracts on conventional, with a buyer getting a conventional loan. What I have prepared in your training is an offer preparation form. And what this does, it makes life easier for you when you're first doing your contracts. And actually, it's probably easy to just carry around and make, and then you can come home and type the contract and get all the forms together. What we do is we have AppFile, which as soon as we finish the contract training, I can get you trained on that. And at the very bottom of the AppFiles, you'll see something that says training. And in there's also a sample of all these contracts filled out. So if you need to review at any time, you can do it on your phone, your tablet, or anywhere that you are, which is important in case you have any questions. Always you can call me, but if you need a quick reference at night or after hours and you can't for some reason get in touch with me, or you just want to review and you just want to kind of go through things again and just be comfortable, you can always refer to AppFiles at the bottom, training manual, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. What I have here is the offer preparation form. It just basically has the buyer's name if they're single or married, the address of the property, offer price, the personal property included that they would like, or what's excluded in the property. It has the initial deposit, the first deposit, and then the additional deposit, and how many days until the deposit is due, the closing company, the address of the closing company, and the telephone number of the closing company, and the email of the closing company, because that is required on your contract. If it's cash or mortgage, if it's FHA, VA, or conventional mortgage, the down payment in that circumstance, if it's 20% down conventional, or if it's FHA, then you'll be learning more about that later. But basically that's about 3.5% down, or anything that you know that on what they're going to be putting down. The acceptance date, when the contract needs to be accepted by or it's null and void. The closing date. The as-is, subject to inspection, in how many days? 7 days, we say, is the usual what we try to do. And the cooperating broker. And then lead-based paint, if it's prior to 78. The homeowner's addendum, which we'll be going through in further lessons, not today, but the next time we have lessons, we'll have one with the homeowners association when we do the FHA. The condo addendum, if it's a condominium, you're going to have an addendum for that, disclosing that. I have an example that will be later down the road. And then FHA or VA addendum. So you want to make sure that you have those addendums with your contracts. And that also is included in what you've sent in for your contract sheet that we have gone through. So that will be in the beginning of the sample contracts. Actually, I'll probably have it in with the cash or the conventional, or both. Just so you'll be able to take this around, make a copy of it, bring it with you everywhere. So it will make your life really quickly. If you could just sit down, fill this out with the client, then you'll go home, you'll log into AppFiles, you'll choose the forms you need, then it will send an email out to the client, they can sign it on a tablet or a telephone, and then get it back to you, then you can send it to the other agent for signatures. So, like I said, we're doing conventional contracts. Again, we have to have the tax and the MLS to prepare this contract. Then also we want the RE/MAX information sheet, and there's an example in your package on how to fill that out. It's basically just filling in the blanks. On the commission breakdown, you really don't need to do that. The only time that you would do that is if there's a referral due. Say that you had to pay 25%, you referred the client from RE/MAX, then you would want to put that in here and where the check has to be drawn. Other than that, Katie can figure it all out. It's in our computer. Again, I want to emphasize the importance of the seller disclosure. That should be signed by the buyers. I told you when you're on the listing, if you have the listing end, that the seller needs to fill this out, not you. You need to be very familiar with it, because if the seller asks you a question, you don't want to be like, oh, I don't really know that. So you want to be familiar. If there's anything in here that you don't understand, call me. I mean, what it asks them is their age of the roof and if there's any leaks. I mean, pretty much all of it is easy to answer and self-explanatory. But if you do have a question, don't hesitate to ask me prior to having a problem. So that's 3 pages. I recommend, again, the board contract for that. We're using the as-is contract. I'm not even going to go into the repair contract again. Basically, I showed you an example of that. Unless the client really wants that, we do everything as is. The good thing about the repair clause is that they're going to have to be stuck to that contract to a certain percent of repairs. But really, most of us have gotten away from that. It doesn't mean that there won't be repairs negotiated after the as-is time period. Usually that's 7 days. Have inspections within the 7-day period. At that point, if there's repairs, they can be negotiated or accepted by the buyer, or the buyer can say that they want $5,000, or the buyer can tell them they want $10,000. Whatever the buyer wants at that point is back to negotiating. If the buyer says, I'm accepting it as is, then it's done. I don't think I mentioned before, I mentioned probably the lead-based addendum that needs to be done prior to 78. Now, that doesn't mean you just have them sign the lead-based addendum. It means that they have been provided by Protect Your Home from Lead brochure. I've enclosed a copy here. You want to make sure this is, when you're in App Files, that you send this to the client. It is a brochure that explains everything about the lead and the dangers of it and the effects of it. So you want to make sure that you don't just check off, oh yeah, I've told them about lead-based paint disclosure, but you want to give them the actual disclosure because that's what you're required to do. So this is the lead paint disclosure. It's in your booklet. And then you would just hand them this or email them this just so they will have an idea on how they could get away from having it basically says to paint the walls. If there's any chipping paint, that they should scrape that. It gives them an idea of exactly what they need to do. It's the EPA brochure, and that's required for you to give that to your client. Now we go on to the as-is contract. Now the as-is will be filled out exactly the same as we filled out the cash contract, except for by the face of the contract, you want to have the purchase price, the $10,000 deposit as we discussed in the prior contract. But then you'll have the additional $30,000, and then under here where it has financing, then you can put either percentage or an amount. I chose to put the percentage, so then you would put 80%. And that would be an 80% loan or 80% financing. If they were putting 10% down, you'd say 90% financing. Or you could give them what the 90% is, either or in a figure and a cash amount. And then the difference in what they will be needing to bring for closing. In this case, with a 20% loan, they need to come up with $56,000. So the balance would be the difference in the deposit plus the $56,000. That would equal the $96,000 that would be needed to be put down to make the 80%. So just check and double check your math and make sure that's correct. So time for acceptance of offer, you always want to have, I recommend 24 hours unless there's special circumstances. You want to make it be urgent. You don't want to say, oh, they love the house, this is the only house they want. You want to say there's a few choices. So we would like to get an answer today so they don't lose something else. So you always want to put urgency with the offer. Closing date, with a conventional loan, you need to talk to the lender and see how long they need. Anywhere from, I think about 30 days is good, 30 to 45 days with a conventional loan. With my lender, with other lenders it could be a little bit more, but you want to check with the lender and feel when they feel is a comfortable closing date and a comfortable closing date with the buyer. What I usually do is I like to have it prior to the end of the month because the end of the month gets a little hectic. So if you want, the prorations will be less at the end of the month. So if you go if on the Friday before the end of the month, it's a lot better. So try to maybe even make it a Thursday or Wednesday before the end of the month. So try to go a few days before that in case there's any delays, because sometimes things get delayed at the end of the month. So you want to make sure, in order to avoid that, that if you come up a little bit closer to the end of the month, then that'll help on getting things done a little earlier. So if the closing date, if the Friday falls on the 31st, you may put it at Wednesday, and then the 29th. And then that would be a lot better, because then you have a couple days if there's any problems. And then you could always extend it a day or two too, where it's just a lot better for the client and a little bit more comfortable, because things do get delayed, especially with all the new laws. Basically, occupancy will be most of the time at possession and funding. So if your clients, also always try to get the closing in the early part of the day, and try to avoid Friday closings for another reason, funding. Because a lot of times what happens is if you do it on Friday afternoon, it gets delayed to the end of the day, then you can't get funding, and then sometimes they could say, I don't want to give you the keys, we haven't received my wire, I haven't received my funds. So if you do your closings on a Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday, it's a lot better for you, because then the funding has taken place. If it hasn't, it will take place in the next morning, and it will ensure you get the keys. So I used to always do my closings on Friday till I ran into a problem. I said that will never happen again. That's amazing advice for you right there. So try to get them, Wednesday is a perfect day, because that'll give you 2 days if anything falls up, 1 day to get it extended, 1 day to get to past Friday, where you can get it all funded, get the keys for the weekend, because most people like the keys for the weekend. Assignability, again, you always want to check, no, this may not be assigned, because if you say yes, it can be assigned, and then you assign it to someone that doesn't qualify, they could in chance get their money back. So you want to say no unless it's a special circumstance if you feel comfortable with that. Financing, then you, instead of saying that it's going to be cash for the property, you're going to say that there is a contingency on getting a loan. And that's going to be, you're going to, under, on page 2, under 8 financing, you're going to say it's contingent, and in this case it's a conventional loan. And it's 45 days if left blank. If you're going to have a loan commitment, make sure that it coincides with the contract. If the contract's closing in 30 days, you don't want a 45-day loan commitment. You want to have a 30-day or maybe 20-day loan commitment. So make sure that those dates all jive. It has 45 days because that's usually what people like to have, the lenders like to have. So I just put the 45 in there. And then it's asking, one thing you can get tricked on too is it's asked to give you an interest rate not to exceed. If left blank, then it will be prevailing rate, which is much better. If you put a rate in there and they can't get that loan, say that you put 4.5%, and it was 4 3/4, and they couldn't get a loan at 4.5%, then you've just lost your deal. If you have prevailing rate in terms, then the bottom line is whatever their credit worthiness is for a prevailing rate is where they're going to have to close. So you always want to leave that at prevailing rate 100% of the time. The other thing is that there's 30 years. It's basically blank in there. I like to fill in all the blanks, except for you can't really fill in that blank. So I try to fill in all the blanks just so there's no question. With the prevailing rate in terms, for prevailing rate, you really can't fill it in there. So I just leave that blank. Buyer will make mortgage application in 5 days. That's the norm. Hopefully they've done it already and they have a underwriting and everything else already done. A DU. This also is just basically talking about closing costs and the evidence of title, and insurance, that they have to have that all done. You always want, again, the Miami-Dade Broward regional provisions. You want to check that. This is just stating that they're going to get a survey about the home warranty again. If the buyer insists on that and what it costs, we have that in a brochure in our office. Most of the time we just say not applicable. The seller will pay assessments in full if there are any. In this case, there's no homeowners association or condo association, so there would be none. And then it gives the radon gas, the mold, the energy, the lead, and make sure that they say that the disclosure is mandatory. Make sure again they get that brochure because that's important. Then the other thing is they have just tax disclosure summary, and they have the FIRPTA withholdings. That again, see me with questions on FIRPTA. Basically, if there's any foreign seller, you need to know about that. And you need to, if you have any seller that's from out of this country, see me on that, please. Then basically the seller's disclosure. Again, I always ask for the seller's disclosure to give the buyer. Make sure that you never fill it out, ever, ever, ever. This is the as is. 7 days to inspect. Basically, it says that you're back to negotiating or accepting the property. That they have the right to have a walkthrough at closing. The walkthrough is to make sure everything is in the house as the day that they saw it. It should be broom swept, clean, ready for occupancy. That of course all permits have to be satisfied. The escrow agent needs to be filled in on the front of the contract. I have that in the contract. You need to, whoever's doing the closing and holding the deposit needs to be filled in there. Or actually it's not, it's the escrow, whoever's holding the escrow needs to be filled in there. I'm sorry about that. Whoever is going to be, usually it's the title companies and the closing agent, that's why I said that, but say that you had a circumstance where RE/MAX is holding the deposit, then the escrow agent would be RE/MAX, and that needs to be filled in with the address, with the email, with the telephone number, all that information is required. If the buyer defaults, there's resolutions for default, and seller, of course, then depending on what the circumstances are, then whoever is the winning party would be able to recover attorney fees. Title examination. Of course, everything has to clear title. It has to be clean in order to be transferred. Then again, it's just basically it's saying if there's leases, if there's liens, and it just kind of talks about different things that have to be handled, and the prorations, that everything will be prorated to the day of closing, to the exact day, and the credits. It talks about appraisals, inspections, and walkthroughs, that you'll be able, that the seller is to provide power to the property and have the utilities on, so these things can be performed. It basically talks about just waivers, contract not recordable or persons bound till everything is you have to have everything signed and delivered by that date of acceptance to have this contract be bound. Riders, of course, basically that's the provisions. Anything changed in initial will supersede the contract. Ride as an addendum will supersede the contract too, and basically that's the way that it is. And let me see what else is important. Just again, it has FIRPTA. FIRPTA is very important. See me. Foreign sellers. Sellers. You need to see me on those to make sure we're not dealing with any FIRPTA issues. Let me see, then basically the part here, there's just whatever addendums there are, anything that you have that's going to be included. All of these addendums are in app files. You can review all of them. I'm not going to go into every single one of them. Some of them are just very simple. Come to see me on a need-to-know basis. I'm giving you the main ones that we use every day because you'll never remember little things here and there. If there's anything special circumstances, come see me, and then we'll handle those. Counteroffer and rejection. Of course, if anything's changed, the offer is either counted or rejected. It could be totally rejected, or if they change the price, initial, sign everything, then that would be a counteroffer. So this just deals with the counteroffer. And let me see. Then basically you just have the companies that were involved in the transaction. And notices are important, so they'll have information if there's any kind of legal problems where they will have to be notified. The buyer and seller will sign there. Then the comprehensive rider, which is the the lead-based disclosure, disclosure. Basically, if the seller has no knowledge, they need to initial. If the seller has no records of anything prior, they need to initial. And that if they're going to receive a 10-day opportunity to go through the house, which I'm sure that will be like in their as-is period, and or they're going to either waive the opportunity, which most people just waive it. They take the flyer, read about it, and find out if there's any problems. Basically, you have to really paint the walls. And then that they accept or reject that. And that's it. So that concludes our conventional offer. It's very easy. Again, I want to reiterate, go through the contract several times, read them inside and out, highlight anything you don't get, see me about it. If you understand it, awesome. Just make sure you're comfortable. If anybody has any questions on it, that they can be answered easily. But other than that, don't forget your offer preparation form, which is going to be important that you have and that you fill out to make things easier and make the process of filling out the contract a lot quicker when you have to do it. Thank you, and tomorrow I'll be recording FHA and VA loans. Thank you.